We're live. Hey, you guys. It is Lisa Alexander, founder and executive director of Stand Up Survivor. I have a special guest tonight, so I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to pop on and join us while I take care of a couple of housekeeping. Bill, give me 1 second. And before I introduce you, I want to make sure that everybody's on so they don't miss a thing. So just give me 1 second. Make sure that when you come in, you tell us where you're from, where you're tuning in from. We're glad that you are joining us tonight for such an important topic. So come on in. All right, you guys. Hey. Say hey when you come in so we know that you're there. So again, I'm Lisa Alexander, founder and executive director of Stand Up Survivor, and I'm super honored and humbled to have Mr. Bill Mitchell here. Hey, Bill.
Hi.
I'm so glad you joined me.
I'm so glad you opened the door and let me come in. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. You guys, Bill is the author of When Dating Hurts. And tonight we're going to be talking about the devastating loss of his beautiful daughter, Kristen Mitchell. I posted a picture of her earlier on the page. And this was in 2005. So, Bill, you're coming up on the 15th anniversary of the passing of your daughter.
Yeah, in fact, we just passed it June. It was June 3rd.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a tough anniversry. This past year, obviously the very first year after it happened was very tough, but for some reason the 15th really took our breath away.
Wow.
So happy.
Why do you think that was?
I mean, we had a similar thing at the 10th. I think it's like anniversaries, when you're married or kids or whatever that is, certain numbers just kind of hit you a little more strongly than others. So 15 was a big one. Yeah.
Well, we are devastated for your loss. I know that there are parents watching this. I know that there are victims currently experiencing domestic violence, and I know that there are survivors watching as well. So I know, Bill, that you have a very, very important message that we're going to talk about tonight. And so tell us a little bit about, you wrote a book called When Dating Hurts. Can you just show it to us, Bill? Because I don't have my copy in front of me. But as soon as I saw him, I don't even know how I saw you on social media, but I grabbed the book the same day and I messaged him and I said, I'm getting your book. There it is, When Dating Hurts. And we're going to tell you how you can grab your copy. Actually, can you turn it to the side? I want y'all to see how thick this book is the other way. Yeah, it is full of his journey of him and his family of surviving this loss. So thank you, Bill. We'll tell you guys how to get that. But tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book, Bill.
Well, one of the things is having experienced something like this, something so devastating as having your daughter murdered, is something that you wouldn't wish on anybody. You wouldn't want to see someone go through it. And I think the thing is that we just didn't want to see another Kristen Mitchell situation, knowing, the type of thing that happened to her, but her family, her friends had their whole lives torn apart. Relatives, I mean, just so many people. You never appreciate the ripple effect of how many people it affects until you go through the funeral process and I mean, 400 or 500 people came through the funeral home. So
wow.
We just didn't want to see that happen. And then the other thing is, over the years, I felt like I had learned so much about dating violence and domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual abuse, all these things. Because I had this voracious appetite to learn all I could, but I felt like I'd learned enough. And then I just felt like, after giving over 100 speeches over the years at high schools and colleges and police academies and community groups and different places, private companies, I just felt like I knew I could serve this up. I'd spoken about it, and now the next thing was to write about it. The other thing is that knowing that you have 200 or 300 pages to work with, I could tell things that I never had. I'd never had people long enough to tell them the secondary and tertiary stories that I thought were also so valuable. So the book brought a lot of freedom. It took a long time. It was over 4 years to put it together.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. But you know what? There are a lot of details in there where you talk about your honest journey. So Bill, tell us about your daughter. Tell us about Kristen.
Well, I mean, Kristen was just a great person. And I mean, one of the things I write about in the book was that when she was born, the way I put it in the book was that everybody thinks their child is perfect. But what What I wrote was she really was
Hmm.
right from the start. She was just this gorgeous little girl. And but the thing with her is she grew. She always had a lot of friends, knew how to keep friends, was super loyal with her friends, great with her family, fun, great sense of humor. I mean, I have to give her a lot of A's on her report card, right? But a little bit later on, and she got into her teens. She was an equestrian rider, and she had ribbons going around the whole perimeter of her ceiling at home here, and played the flute beautifully. So she was the full package, and then the thing with her is that she did her high school years, of course, and she went to St. Joseph's University in Philly. And she took food marketing, and she came out with a job with General Mills, and she was going to be starting that job in a few weeks.
Wow.
And so she was going to be a sales associate, and everything was really kind of knitting together. And I remember writing someone an email at that time saying things like, we've got one of them out of the nest. Now we'll concentrate on her brother, which of course her brother thought, oh, great. Now I got mom and dad only on
all
me.
attention. Yeah.
Right. But Kristen seemed to have seemed to have blossomed and seemed like she was just taking off. And honestly, when we left the graduation that day, we felt like, wow, this was everything we invested in her all that time and all the other resources and everything like that. It was now on her, and she was doing beautifully with it. So,
Yeah, she had made you guys so proud. I read about that in the book. See the graduation pictures. You guys drove up for her graduation, and it was just a beautiful time. And that's when you first met. Yeah. The
last day that I saw her alive was a graduation day. And that is the first day I ever met the boyfriend.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you know of their relationship beforehand?
We knew very little.
Okay.
We live outside of Baltimore, and Kristen was at school in Philadelphia, and she'd been dating this guy 6 months or so, 4, 5, 6 months or so.
Okay.
And, but we didn't know much about him. The one thing that sticks out was in a phone conversation my wife had with Kristen. At some point, my wife was talking about the relationship she had, and Kristen said, well, it's not the perfect relationship. And I think Michelle, my wife, I think that she kind of took that as, well, this isn't going to last, and there's no point really talking about it. It sounded like it was pretty much coming to a close. I'm not sure exactly when that was in time.
Okay.
It wasn't like right near the end, that last week or anything, but it just sounded like this will kind of come and go and on to better things.
Okay. You didn't think too much into it. That phrase, no red flags in that phrase or anything like that.
No.
Right.
No.
Right. I mean, so it was just 2 weeks after her graduation?
It was 20 days.
20 days after
20 days after graduation, she was attacked and killed. Yes.
In her apartment.
Yes.
Yes. And as someone said in the comments, take your time. There are no words for the loss of a child, especially as such a devastating loss, and you're so far away from her and things like that. So tell me, as you think about the journey, as like that phone call that she said, that comment where she made, oh, it's not going to last long, or you were thinking it's not going to last long. Do you think that as a parent, like those that are listening, should they ask more questions? Is there something that you would think as a parent, or is that just a phrase that you might hear and you think nothing of it?
Well, having the wisdom that we got the hard way, right?
Mm-hmm.
If someone came to me and said, wow, I was talking with my daughter and she was talking about her boyfriend and said, well, it's not the perfect relationship, then I'd say something like, well, okay. What does that mean? Tell me more about that.
Right.
One of the keys and one of the real points I make in the book is that as a parent, you have to kind of work on your listening skills, but you also have to work on your questioning skills. And what I mean by that is you don't want to become an interrogator. You're not going to put a hot light on them and blow cigar smoke in their face, right?
Yeah.
But what you want to do is you want to have ongoing conversations with them, but you want to draw them out. So for instance, like, well, look, tell me, what does that mean? Tell me more about that. Have them rephrase things that they say. And honestly, most people, when they make a statement like that, would probably want to talk about it some more. It's like, well, I don't know,
Yeah.
Sometimes he does this and sometimes he does that. But the thing is that in that, two things are happening. You're learning more about it yourself, but you're also helping them think it through.
So true.
So you kind of want to draw that out. You want to learn the truth. You want to learn the truth about that relationship, but you want them to realize the truth about that same thing. You want them to express their feelings to you, right? So, because jumping to kind of the end of this, if they're in an unhealthy relationship, the only way they're coming out of it is when they decide to get out of it. You can't, as a parent, you can't, as a friend, decide for them and say, oh, you got to break that off. And then they just magically break it off.
Right.
That's the last thing that's going to happen. So, you have to try to work on your skills, and you want to be a good listener, not a good judger, so to speak. And
I love that. That's so true.
And I say that because, I think if I were a friend or a bystander of my daughter back in those days, and she was talking about it, and I jumped all over her every time she told me about this relationship and say, well, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? You don't want to date this guy, and bang, 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 bang. What it does sometimes is it puts that abused person in a position where they feel like they now have to defend the guy that's actually abusing them, or at least making them uncomfortable, let's say, or
Very
controlling
true.
them. So you inadvertently wind up driving them back. You drive them in the direction that you actually didn't want them to be in the first place. So.
I love how you said when someone said, okay, she asked a question and you say, okay, well, tell me more about that, because like you said, what it does is it starts the conversation. And one of the things I think, as a survivor myself, you don't realize what you're in until you start to talk about it, until you start to throw it off of somebody. And then you realize maybe this isn't so normal after all.
Right. I mean, one of the easy things, this sounds like a psychology discussion, and I guess it is in some ways, but a good psychologist is just going to keep feeding you questions like, wow, that sounds kind of tough. How did that make you feel?
Yeah.
That's a great question, because that person now has to kind of say it differently and maybe make it a little bit more of an emotional or deeper answer, kind of go with it a little bit. So
I love that, Bill. And I think just for parents, as well as those who love ones, friends, family, if you know someone who's in an abusive relationship, like Bill said, badgering them is not going to make them leave. Like you said, it actually does the exact opposite. And so asking questions, okay, how does that make you feel? So what do you do when that happens? Those kind of questions that help them rephrase it so they're aware of what's happening, but also it's giving you key information that you need to figure out where they are.
Right. Yeah. One of the best questions I ever asked was actually of, there was a mother who reached out to me a few years ago. Her daughter was a senior in high school. And so she heard about me and she reached out to me. And we had a couple of conversations. And I said, it'd be great if you could ever pull it off, is to get your daughter and you to come on the phone with me sometime and let's just talk a little bit. So some Sunday morning, weeks later, 10 a.m. and Sunday morning, really was 10 a.m. I got a phone call from the mother, and she had, I think her name is Julia, was her daughter. So we're having this conversation on the phone. So she went through what it was like dating this guy, and she was hedging a bit. So mom was kind of fitting some parts in there, which I had already heard about from the mom. But we kind of worked our way through it. Anyway, the question I gave her, and it's the first time I'd ever thought to ask this question, but the question I gave to Julia, the senior in high school, was, do you think at the ripe old age of 18 years old, this is the best you can do? In other words, let's play this out. 4 years from now, you graduate from college and you get a job, and maybe he gets a job, but he's the same guy. He's still doing some of the things he does now. He's still super controlling. He's manipulative. He's separating you, isolating you from friends, and sometimes your family members. All these things are going on. Okay, so you're going to go through your 20s, and maybe you'll have children, and then you have to go with him and maybe get a house or get cars and things like that. But you could be with this guy for 60, 70 or some years. Now, as of today, looking ahead, do you think that guy's actually the best you can do? In other words, if you traded him in, do you think you could do a little better than that? Somebody who's maybe a little nicer, somebody who treats you better than that? And I said, and by the way, don't answer that question. Think about that question, but don't tell me the answer. It's none of my business.
Wow.
And her mother told me a couple months later that was what made the difference. So
wow, that's
it's an interesting question.
Yeah,
Is this
it
the
is.
best you can do?
and letting them think about that answer. Because like you said, the isolation had already started because, I know statistics on it, but teen dating is huge. And the age frame that your daughter was in from the teens up until about 24, 25 are the highest rates of domestic violence.
Yes.
And
16,
it's happening
16 to 24. Yes.
16 to 24 are the ages where the rates are very high with domestic violence. So someone asked a question a few minutes ago and said, do you have any advice for parents? Any red flags for a parent to look for? Bill.
I wrote a whole book about it. I have a lot of advice. I'm going to look over it this way because I have a list of some of them. So these are the type of red flags that I talk about. And one of them would be, and by the way, when I go through these, you can't help but when you hear them think, oh, I know people who do that to me. We're having a conversation maybe about your daughter or your friend. But in this, you're going to hear things like you probably experienced in your own life just today, ironically. But constant put downs would be one of them. Now, you may not have thought about this, but a reason somebody puts you down is to keep you in the place that they want you to be in. Right. I'm better than you, therefore I make fun of you. Or I remind you about things that you don't like about yourself. Controlling or dominant behavior. So that's just somebody that always have to get their way. They are find very, the people who do this all the time are accomplished at this. They've tried out things in their young teens and they tried out things in their later teens and maybe they're in their 20s. But if you do it all the time, like anything, you get good at it. Unfortunately, these are people who get good at things that aren't good.
Yep. But
that controlling or dominant behavior, and part of that is making you do things. And if you do what that person wants, you get rewarded. And if you don't, you get punished somehow.
Right.
You get dissed or you don't get to go to that thing or you don't get that thing you wanted. Checking your cell phone or email without your permission would be an example. This guy who killed Kristen would do that. If she were in the bathroom or if she were somewhere else busy or something like taking care of laundry or whatever she was doing or something, she found out later on that he went on her instant message in that time. This is 2005, but went on her some version of that back in those days. And he would come on as if he were Kristen and ask her friends what they thought about him.
Wow. So manipulative. Wow.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, that is.
Extreme jealousy or possessiveness is one of them on the list. And Kristen actually in her last email to me used the phrase, this jealous acting guy. So, she called it, but I didn't know the warning signs back in those days. I'll move through these, but isolating you from family and friends, just making it particularly difficult for you to be around all those other people in your life. So eventually it's all about the guy. It's all about me, or it's all about whoever that person is. Might be a guy, might not be a guy. Explosive temper and big mood swings. Okay. Another, it's other things that you, if you're the partner of that person, other things you have to put up with. Constantly checking up on you via calls or text messages. What are you doing now? What are you doing now? Well, why are you doing that? Well, why aren't you seeing me? Why are you with them?
And Bill, oftentimes, especially in that age range, we're talking 16 to 24, it's looked at as love. They just really care about me. They just really love me. And this is abuse. And this is the beginning stages of control, of power and control.
It's exactly what it is. Years ago, they used to call it possessiveness, and it was just a nice way of saying this person's annoying me because they keep checking up on me. But now it's power and control issues.
Power and control.
Two that kind of go together are making you feel nobody else would ever want you.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's almost like, wow, you're lucky I'm even dating you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're that close that you don't even have me.
Yeah.
Another one would be making you feel you can't do anything right.
Yeah.
Which we don't have to talk about it for long, but that falls under the heading of something called gaslighting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's so funny. Somebody can send in the comments. Everything you're saying is absolutely correct. I just want to touch on somebody just shared that their mother was killed in 1984 because she was leaving an abusive marriage.
Yeah. Well,
we are sorry for your loss.
Yes,
we know how devastating. You were only 12 years old. Oh, it's Angel. Yeah.
Yep. Well, it's another example of breaking up is the most dangerous time.
It is the most dangerous time. We emphasize that all the time. We want you to leave, but we want you to leave safely. And that's the most important thing. So as a parent, Bill, do you have any advice for another parent that is listening or watching? Because like we just said, if they have children or teenagers, even the rates are high for statistics for domestic violence in dating alone. So what are some red flags that you would tell to parents or things that parents should look out for?
Well, I mean, some of the ones we were going through, the warning signs are really important. And you may not know what those things are, again, unless you become a better conversationalist than maybe you have been up to now. You want to seek out those things, or maybe sometimes talk with their friends. If their friends are saying, wow, I can't stand who she's dating. Well, then it's like, well, what do you think? I'm not so crazy about this person either, but I mean, what do you see? What do you know? That type of thing. But the idea here is that when you get to that place that you're sure, as a parent, let's say, and actually this kind of goes like as a parent or even as a friend, it doesn't have to just be parent the whole time speaking. It's someone who, a bystander, somebody who really cares about that person and is starting to pick up on things that don't feel right. But the one thing that I tell everybody, because I put myself in that position years ago. Now I didn't see it coming in our case. In other words, the first thing I learned about dating violence was told to me by a detective standing outside of a grocery store when they caught up with me after finding me, calling me my cell phone, and I met up with them at a grocery store.
Yeah.
And I did that because I didn't know who really was calling me. I was driving at the time.
I remember.
So I tried to pick a safe place just in case whoever was said they were a detective. If they really weren't, I didn't want to get ambushed somehow. But the thing is this, that let's say, so in other words, I didn't see it coming, it was over when I learned about it. However, if you do see it coming, if this is something that's ongoing or something that you detect 6 months from now and it's kind of coming along, you say, oh my God, it sounds like the thing that Lisa and Bill were talking about that night. Okay, this is what you want to do though. You want to be careful. You want to seek as much professional help as you can. Now, I would point you in the direction of the National Dating Violence Hotline. I'd go there, or some local hotline. There are domestic violence agencies all over this country. I mean, you don't have to look very far, but you want to start having conversations quietly about this because you want to get a sense of where you should go and what you should do. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go charging into a situation thinking, oh my God, it's my child.
Yeah.
And go in there and do what we talked about earlier, which was accidentally driving your child back to the person who's the abuser.
Right.
Because the next thing you know, she could say, well, if you're going to be like that, I'm moving out. Well, that's not exactly what you wanted to happen. Or we're going to pack up and we're going to leave. So you don't want any of those things. So you want to learn as much as you can. You want to learn a lot of the do's and don'ts. And I would tell you that I probably would have made a lot of mistakes had this been an ongoing thing with Kristen. I'd want to grab my car keys and go visit this person and say, what the heck's going on here? That would have been a big mistake, because then it's maybe some fight breaks out and I wind up getting hurt, or we both wind up getting hurt, or God knows what. So it's very, you have to look at this like seek information, but you have to trust that it is a dangerous time potentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Because something's going down. Emotions are running high. You're doing this to my child, and this person's looking at it like, yeah, that's right. I am doing it. So, but you don't want to insert yourself and think you can play Superman and make everything kind of come back together and all that type of thing. But I would say, you get more information. I mean, that's, and the people who do that, the people who answer those hotlines, they're not just trying it out. They're very well trained.
Right.
By the way, they're not going to just call the police and send somebody in either. It's all at your discretion. The other thing I'd say too about making that phone call, because I can imagine that would be pretty scary to make that call for whoever it is do it with a friend if you need to. I mean, for instance, if it were my daughter and I would want her to maybe speak with some hotline or somebody who's a domestic violence agency, I'd say, why don't we do this together? Why don't we make this phone call? And if at some point you want to get off the phone, we'll hang up. Make it easy. Another thing is if you can get some information and just kind of like leave it on their bed.
Yeah.
And just say, read this when you get a chance. No hurry. But it's hard when you have something like this happen. You want it to be over with tonight.
Right, of course, because it's life and death. You know how serious it is.
Yeah.
But the truth is, the way the domestic violence work, it's not an overnight thing. It doesn't happen. But I think one of the best things I really like that you said was become a better conversationalist, and less judgmental, because before you know it, you're pulling out information that they may have never told you if you would have just, asked a yes or no question. Someone said in the comments that women don't tell family or friends for the same reason they don't want to tell the police, because then what? And I remember, as a survivor myself, I remember telling my brother, and then I went back, and he said, "What you keep calling me for if you're going to keep going back?" And that's the typical reply. That's the typical way that it goes, and then if my sisters find out, everyone would hate him, but I still love him. And so as a survivor, you're kind of caught in between that because you love the abuser. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, Kate, I totally understand what you're saying, but I would suggest, of course, that you tell someone needs to know what you're going through. Someone just needs to know. I see you're about to say something, Bill.
No, I was just going to say, and I hear what you were saying, because you were in a relationship that was unhealthy. But it's like the news here is that you might love the abuser, but the abuser doesn't love you.
The abuser loves himself.
There's a whole organization called Love Is Not Abuse. They didn't just come up with a clever phrase. That's love is not abuse.
Nope.
The other thing I think is interesting is that I know when I found this, I felt very good for finding it, but it was that fear is the opposite of love. Mm-hmm. I found that to be interesting, because you think, no, hate is the opposite of love. It's not really. Because one thing about, like, you also will hear hate is hurt love. But the opposite, like when you really love somebody, you want to be with that person and you feel secure with that person and you feel good and all these things. It's kind of like, the birds are singing in the background and it's great, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, fear isn't that. That's for sure. I mean, fear is terror. Fear is, I don't want to be around him, but I feel like I have to be around him.
Right. And that's not love. That has nothing to do with
not around
love.
him, I'm going to get punished again. Something bad's going to happen. And
that's just not love. That's not love. If you're feeling fear in your relationship, that's not love. And like Bill just said, if you're afraid, if you're away from them for a certain amount of time, like I remember I always had my phone with me, because if I miss a text or a phone call, forget about it. There was a price to pay after. And so that's that fear, that instill fear, and it's not normal. And it's not love, like you said.
Living in fear is not love. Let's be honest.
It's not love. Yeah. Right. Angel said over in the comments, I didn't tell my family until I left. And oftentimes that's the case. But I will tell you how important it is for someone to know the situation that you're going through. And Bill, were you aware afterward? Because I know I was, as I was reading the book, there was a letter from a close friend of Kristen's. Did she really tell anybody the situation that she was in?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She told her closest friends. Her friend Samantha is in the book in a lot of different places. And she was, she told her everything as things happened. And the thing that Samantha said to her and some of her other friends said to her was, why don't you do this? And I thought this was smart, but why don't you at least take a time out, and why don't you get some space from him and get a little bit objective about this whole thing? Because they felt like they could see that this was not good. This could get worse. I don't think no one thought it was going to get dangerous or physical or someone was going to get killed. No one saw that coming. But they did want her to get some space. And her friend Samantha, now Kristen was killed on June 3rd. So just prior to that, the weekend before was Memorial Day weekend. So Samantha and Kristen got in a car on a Friday and they went to the Jersey Shore and they were going to spend the next 3 days there. And this guy started that afternoon and evening with text messages and calls. And then the next morning he was going and going and going. Then he kind of got into this little sob story and feel sorry for me story. And it kind of broke through and he manipulated her. And next, he drove from near Philadelphia to the Jersey Shore and picked her up and ruined the whole weekend and took off with her.
Wow. Wow,
So
but you know, it's so interesting that you tell that story because there's so many red flags in that story. And I hope that if someone is listening and they recognize any of the stalking, the text, all of a sudden she went away for a weekend with her girlfriends, and all of a sudden she leaves with him because, you know,
right.
he needs her, he wants her. Those are huge red flags. And so I see someone said in the comments they also told their closest friends. And I love what they said. How about take a break? Take a moment. And of course, when you tell an abuser you need a break or you need a moment, that's not going to go across well. They don't want to hear that. You know, for them,
No,
they think they're losing something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a defeat, or that means someone else could slip in there. Can't have that type of thing. That's a big no. You know, they've gotten you to a certain point and they don't want to lose ground with that.
Yeah.
Because they've been slowly but surely isolating you.
And they've got this kind of control over you, the manipulation, like someone just said. And I love what you said about others can see what you can't. And I know that may be difficult to see if you're headstrong into this relationship that is unhealthy, but others can see from the outside looking in what the relationship looks like from the outside. And so I'd encourage you not to push off what other people may be saying about, hey, maybe it's not healthy, maybe you need a break. And I also will insert this to anyone who is listening that may be in a domestic violence relationship. Do not make any announcements that you're planning on leaving. That is extremely dangerous. And you know, well, sometimes we, you know, Bill, we start to get strong. We find our strength. I'm leaving you, and not realizing that's one of the most dangerous things because they're going to lose their grip. They're going to lose control, and that's what we don't want.
That's right. You know, so Kristen had gotten killed, and we had a few court dates and things like that. But I remember leaving there one day, and I said to the prosecutor, I said to her, how would you have somebody break up? I mean, Kristen did it the wrong way. Kristen did it alone in her apartment at night, and that didn't work out at all. But what would you do? And she said, oh, well, what would I do? She said, I'd probably tell somebody, use somebody else's phone, call this guy up, and then say it's over. Do it in about 15 seconds or so, as fast as possible. Hang up. And if I could, I'd get out of town for 2 weeks. And as I've said to groups and speeches, you can't do that very well when you're a high school student and even a college student. And it's hard to do it when you're working. But in a way, you have to kind of find your own plan somehow.
Yeah.
But you don't want to do it alone. I know people who will break up, they'll find a public place with a lot of people around so they feel like something crazy won't go down. There was a policewoman who told me that when she broke up with this guy, she was going to do it in her apartment alone, but she had heard our story. So then when she finally broke up, and believe me, this woman looked like she could handle herself, but she said, when I break up with this guy, I'm going to do it in a restaurant, in a diner, and the next booth is going to have 4 or 5 guys who are from the SWAT team sitting there.
Wow.
I'm not taking any chances.
Yeah. And it's that serious. Someone said in the comments that they did 2 months of secret planning. And that's the thing. And they don't need to know you're leaving. You just need to have a plan. And so we encourage you to connect with an advocate so that you can safety plan safely and get out safely. They don't need to know that you're leaving. I mean, and so many people, I remember I was working with one survivor and it took months of secret planning to get her to safety. And she's to safety today, you know, and that's what you don't need to make an announcement. Sometimes it's best if you just are able to leave. But sometimes, like you said, from that age range, it's not really easy to just disappear. So safety planning is an important part. So let's talk about a couple people in the comments. I don't know if you have a comment about Bill mentioned that when they threaten to leave, that their partner threatened suicide. And that is, I mean, I experienced it with my ex-husband. That is a typical abuser response. I'm going to kill myself if you leave me.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I received a call from a guy that I met through church, and he was panicking at the time. And so he called me. I mean, it was just really this past March, just a few months ago. And anyway, he called me up and he said that his daughter, who was a senior in high school near here, that she was in school. She had dated a guy a couple times. She just considered him a friend, really nothing more. And he made it clear to her this one particular week in March that he thought it was boyfriend and girlfriend. And she said, well, no, not really. I mean, I think you're a good guy and all, but I mean, I didn't think we were dating. Well, he pretty much went into that place, which is, well, you know, if we're not boyfriend and girlfriend, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then he threatened in his own words to say he would kill himself, maybe. So she hadn't really told her parents too much about this relationship, but she told her father about that part, because that's,
That's big.
that's a biggie. And so he called me and said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, it's an extreme version of manipulation. It's not that somebody won't do that, but it's kind of it's at the top of the list of manipulations."
It is.
And I said, "My concern right at this moment is not so much about him, it's about your daughter."
Yep.
So your daughter has to have a complete zero tolerance about conversations with him. Can't talk to you. I'm just not going to talk to you. I'm really sorry. There's certain things, like I have to take care of my life and you have to take care of your life. And I told him, you have to do this. And he checked with a couple other people, and he did call a hotline, and it pretty much came out the same way. So it's like, I'd hate to see you do something to yourself like that, of course, but this is my life, and I have to make smart decisions for me, and you have to do that for you.
And it's so true, though, because they're going to try to put that weight on you. Like you said, it's the top of the manipulation chart. It really is. But I have to just say with such certainty that threat has nothing to do with you. It keeps us there much longer than we need to be, in the fear that, oh my goodness, if I leave, they're actually going to kill themselves. That is not your burden to carry. That is not your weight to bear. That is not your responsibility. Your number one concern is your safety. And if you have children, that of your children. And so you can't control whether they do or whether they don't, but you have to get yourself to safety. I think, and that's the most important part. Hey, Dr. Simone, so glad that you popped in. Thanks for being here. But go ahead, Bill. I think you were about to say something.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm agreeing with you, but you're right. I mean, it's your job is you.
Yeah.
And, I just have to say here, my heart goes out to, we talk about 16 to 24. I remember me at 16 to 24, and my coping skills were brand new. Let's just say right out of the wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about people going through those types of trauma, having such big things laid upon them at that age, it breaks my heart. It really does. And that's probably another reason I put the book together, because I was just hoping that, the parents read it, and maybe, a lot of parents read it and they buy an extra copy for the kids.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to put it up here real quick so you guys see it. WhenDatingHurts.com is where you can get this book. It is so powerful. It is such a detailed description. You kind of journey through from the phone call that they received all the way through the trial, through everything, and processing through what happened with their daughter. And you can also, that's where you can get the book, as well as follow. Please go ahead and follow Bill on Facebook.com, When Dating Hurts. I know that you go to different places, high school, colleges, and do speaking engagements. And I just want to, honor you today, because I know that it wasn't easy to talk about the loss, to write about the loss of your daughter, but I know that you're doing it so that to save other parents. Before we got on, you said something you said, how you got through it, how your family got through it, but you don't know how the next family is going to get through it.
Well, Lisa, you and I were talking about some of the other guests you've had on in the last weeks. And you talked about, a mother who had lost her daughter, who was murdered by a boyfriend situation. And I was just saying that, for one thing, anytime I hear one of those things, even though we are still going through it, we've gone through it, but we're 15 years later still going through it every day. But I know how we got through it. I know how I personally got through it. I know how my family got through it, which was really one step at a time, one day at a time. But I don't know how other people get through it. And I can only say that, we're a strong family, and we are, I'm trying not to do my religious pitch here, because that's not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, but
I feel like, but each of us was in a good place with our Maker at this time. And I feel that for those people who don't have that feeling about why we're all here and the hereafter and all the rest of that, right? Your relationship with God, or if you want to call it that. But if you don't have that going for you, I'm not sure, if your whole life is your children and you lose one like that, you're pretty much bankrupt, and I'm not saying that our kids weren't the most important parts of our lives, really, but God was in there too, and you're not losing that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a powerful revelation and point. You still have a son, amazing son, brilliant, and your beautiful wife as well. So I'm gonna try to answer any questions we have. Bill, just for a few more minutes, and you guys, to get the book, it's on Amazon.com. When Dating Hurts, buy for yourself, buy to share with someone, buy to use it as a reference if you're an educator, if you know whoever you are, someone needs to read this book. Another thing we talked about, take their threats seriously. If an abuser threatens you, please, I'm going to just say one more time, please do not think they would never. Oh, he could never, she could never, they would never hurt me and the kids. It's just.
Yeah, it's good. That's a huge point.
Just, yeah. Go Bill, you can say.
In fact, I kind of go to the other place nowadays. It's like, it's one thing to see bits and pieces of warning signs or evidence or whatever you want to think, and go, well, it could never go to that place. I actually do the opposite. I see the beginnings of that, and I think it could go to that place. I'm expecting it's going to go to that place. And that's why if you know somebody who's in an abusive relationship, you want them to get out as soon as possible. But you have to help them. The other thing about it is, of course, you want them out of it, and it's not going to happen as soon as you would like it. That person has to bottom out. That person has to get to that place on their own. And of course, you can help through all those great questions you asked and the great listening you're doing and everything, and getting them to talk about it. But you can help them get to that bottom out place if you do it gently and you're pretty deft about it. Again, things like, how did that make you feel? How often has that been going on? What do your friends think about that? But it's kind of like sowing some seeds of doubt there that maybe that person thinks, wow, maybe I could do better than this guy. And I guarantee you can. But
that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I might be just quite the opposite because of what we've been through.
But
and I expect it'll go to a bad place. And I want to prevent it from going to a bad place.
And I think that's a really, really, really powerful statement, Bill, because it's like, oh, well, it's just verbally abuse. Oh, he just hits the walls, or oh, it's just physical abuse. That domestic violence can cause death because you have experienced it. So I get why you made the decision to speak all over the world, to write a book, to say, listen, domestic violence is deadly, and Bill, to be honest with you, as an advocate all this time, I don't think people really get that. I don't.
No.
I don't think that people really get that domestic violence is life and death. And I'm sitting, you guys, with a father, a man who can tell you that it is. And I think that's one of the biggest points that we want to make tonight. You can't change them. You don't have to stay just because, there's just so many little points that I could make, but understand, I love when you said it can go there. It can get to death. It can. One of the survivors just here said that she was shot in the head by her abuser. And so we're here to tell you that it can happen. So I'm sorry I got off track, but that was really
one other thing too I didn't want to lose track of is let's say for a moment you get to that place. Let's say for a moment you're being abused. It's an unhealthy relationship. You feel like you're being abused or you are being abused, whatever that thing is that makes you think I got to stop this. And so, maybe this person who's your abusive partner, sort of seems like he's going along with it, but says, well, look, okay, maybe we should break up. Maybe it's just not our time or whatever these things are. Can I see you one last time? Can I talk to you one last time? I'm telling you, there's cemeteries have a lot of people who saw him one last time. Now, I heard a woman speak a few years ago, and she saw him one last time in front of a Target store in the evening. And they sat there and they talked for a minute or two. Then he pulled out a gun and he shot her in the face. And he didn't kill her, of course, but he blinded her in her right eye. And she was just lucky after a lot of rehab to be alive. But she said her whole point of the story was you don't see him one last time.
You don't see him one last time.
You just don't. It has to be zero tolerance.
Yeah.
You don't take a walk. You don't see him. You don't know what's coming your way because you're taking a very controlling person. And your message when you break up is you're not controlling me anymore. And the response is, oh, yes, I am.
Yes, I am. If nobody can have you, if I can have you, no one can have you. And Bill, someone had made in the comments, I needed to hear that. So, hey, April, they think you're right. They think that it could never happen to them. Of course, someone said earlier, I wouldn't fall in love with this person if I thought that they could kill me. that's not a normal thought process for anybody, really. So Bill, I'm just going to reiterate what you just said. There's no one last time. You don't need to get the engagement ring. I've read one about a woman who went to get her engagement ring and he killed her. You don't need to go get the clothes. You don't need the furniture. You do not need to go one last time. This guy, like you just shared, shot her in the face in a Target in a public place.
Right.
You do not need to see them one last time.
Yeah. If you think about things in your life that, you can lose your cell phone, you can lose a car, you can lose a lot of things, right? You can lose your sunglasses that you spent all this money on, right? But if you lose your life, that's it. And in this case, you didn't lose it. You had it stolen from you. Someone stole your life.
Yes.
And that's it. And then you think about, well, your situation's obviously very different, but so is everybody who ever cared about you. I mean, all those people now have to deal with the loss of you. Wow. And that's, wow. That's I mean, so a lot of Kristen's friends went to therapy after, I mean, I know in one instance, somebody who'd known Kristen just about her whole life who was just stopped dating. She just thought, well, I mean, if this can happen from somebody who says that they love you, I don't think I can date somebody because, this could happen to me.
Wow.
And she finally got it turned around. She's married now and is very happy. But
I think you make a good point about the repercussions of if your life is taken due to domestic violence, everyone who's left behind to deal with the loss of your life that was taken from you. And you don't think about that. I have to be honest with you. Having been a victim of domestic violence, I didn't think about that. I thought about my children, Bill, but I just never thought but I always say that I knew he would kill me, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So I had to leave and save my life and that of my children, because that's another thing. It may not be a gun to your head. It could be a shove through a wall. It can be a blow to the head. It can be anything. And so you don't want to assume, well, there's no weapons in the house or he would never, Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, there are plenty of weapons in the house. I mean, there are plenty of lamps and, the worst place that a fight could break out is in the kitchen. Unfortunately for my daughter, that's what happened. Yeah. So, yeah. But
Bill, I'm so glad that you came on here. Is there anything I'd like to just give you the floor? If there's anything you'd like to say or share, please do.
I'll share with you, I've listened to a lot of speeches. I've given a lot of speeches, but I find statistics pretty boring after a while. I remember one evening I actually write about in the book where someone did about 45 minutes of website addresses and phone numbers and statistics. And I remember I was supposed to be speaking next, and I sat there and I was becoming angry, and yet I was going to get up and talk about violence. So I thought that was ironic. But the only statistic I ever give is this one, and that is that 1 in 3 women will suffer serious physical violence in an intimate partner relationship at some time in their lifetime.
Wow. Yeah.
That's 33% of women, and it typically, as we said earlier, happens between the ages of 16 and 24, but 1 in 3 women. Now, you think about it, how many women who have that happen go running off to a statistician someplace and say, hey, put another toke on the board because it just happened to me too. I mean, if 1 in 3 is the statistic, proven statistic, it's probably higher than that. Yeah. And that doesn't account for emotional abuse, which is higher. And by the way, some people will tell you emotional abuse is actually worse than physical abuse. It's harder to get over it, very much harder to get over it. But it's a shocking statistic. So anyway, you say, okay, all right, all this bad news, right? What do I do about it? What can I do? Is this just going to happen? And I'd say, well, what you do about it is you get educated, because education leads to empowerment.
That's right.
So what does that mean? Well, selfishly, I'd say get my book.
Get his book.
But, it's not about that. And believe me, authors don't make that much on books anyway. I'm not going to tell you how much. It's not much. But what I do get out of it is I figure that for every book that gets out there, somebody's going to learn a heck of a lot about domestic violence, dating of violence. They're going to learn a lot. And for every person that learns that, they're going to share it with a bunch of other people. So one book equals 10 or 20 people, right? And so more and more people learn about it, and more people then know what to look for. How, I listen differently when I hear people speak about these things from years ago. If I heard some guy who was a jealous acting guy, I'd just go, well, I don't know. I guess he's difficult, or he's, needs to work on that. But but boy, I see right through it nowadays. And I ask more questions, and I try to do it subtly because I want to draw all of that type of thing out. But you want to know those warning signs. You want to know the red flags.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's why, that's why this book I feel has value, because it can really prepare you to prepare other people and save lives. And the information in there, I know for a fact, has saved lives, because people have approached me and said, I probably wouldn't be alive today.
Wow.
And there is somebody in the book that's mentioned who actually who did use that information and lived to tell about it.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Bill, so much. I just want to reiterate, Bill talked about being a better conversationalist. If you know someone, a parent, if you're a friend of someone who may be experiencing domestic violence, don't be so judgy. Ask them questions. How did that make you feel? Well, how long has that been going on for? And let them pull the conversation out of them. They'll start talking. And as they hear themselves, they may realize what they're really in. So before I let you go, I know there's a part in the book where you talk about the letter that you found in Kristen's stuff. And I just thought that was just such a profound moment. And so can you just share just a little bit? We want them to get the book, but I thought it was just so powerful. We could leave a little bit of that.
If I knew that, I would have bookmarked the page.
Oh, yeah. I put you on the spot. Yeah.
I'd be really lucky if I could just flip to it. This thing's 320 pages.
Content heavy.
I got it.
Yay.
I can't believe it. I'm going to extend your show.
Go for it.
No, the thing that happened was this, is that a couple of weeks after Kristen was killed, and we had to go through the funeral and all the things you do when someone dies, plus a lot of phone calls with detectives and a whole lot of stuff. But we got to her apartment and we took everything out of it and we packed it into the car and came home. And so we just took our time going through box after box, and every college book, every test paper, any place she had written her name on anything, I cut it out and I keep it in an envelope. I have hundreds of her signatures. But in the bottom of one corrugated box, we went through the whole thing. It was 2 months after she was killed. And I just happened to find this one little piece of paper. And this kind of shows you what if I can get over here.
There we go. Perfect.
It looks like.
Yeah, perfect.
But it says a very short note, and it's just incredible. Imagine being a parent and reading this off this piece of paper that was pulled out of a little book. It says, "Dear God, Dear God, please protect me and keep me safe. Love me and let me love you all the days of my life. And when I am with you for eternity, please guide me always and love me forever. Dear Kristen." It's beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Bill. I'm sorry for putting you on this spot. It was one of the most beautiful parts of the book, because I'm sure that when you were going through her stuff, you didn't expect to find that. And we talked before we went on about how that was so personal. That was between her and God, Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And I was saying to you, Lisa, before we started, because you mentioned that note, how easy it would have been for that to get stuck in some part of a textbook or in a notebook and accidentally thrown out, never seen. But boy, I tell you, I stopped that day and I got up and found Michelle. And she was outside the backyard, and I brought her in. I said, "You will not believe what I have on this piece of paper here." And, we were done for a couple hours just thinking about it, and framed it and, put it in a safe place and everything. So, yeah. But, it's almost like she had some sense of what could happen one day to her. I mean, it really has that kind of prescient feeling of, protect me, it's somehow. So she's keeping an eye on us nowadays. And the reason for the locket on the front, if you don't have any other reason to buy this book, you should get it just to read about that locket. Because if you were somebody who had questions about the afterlife, or you probably wouldn't after you find out what that locket's all about. There is a direct connection between this world and the next world that none of us ever saw coming. And believe me, once you read that, I'm not just going to hyperbole on that one. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's an incredible story. And it's especially incredible having lived through it, because we were right in the middle of it. So.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for your Everyone is saying thank you in the comments, how brave you are, and they appreciate you taking the time to share. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. And you guys, you can find his book. Please go ahead and follow him, facebook.com, When Dating Hurts. WhenDatingHurts.com is the website. And you can also grab When Dating Hurts on Amazon.com. So we'll see you guys later. Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Bill, don't go anywhere. Hang out. Okay.
Okay,
All right. Bye, you guys. See you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.